Hello guys, and welcome to a new video posted on my channel. Today is the second episode of the Detectiveomedia series, and today we are going to be talking about the timeline of every single map in battle minigames. So if you guys are excited for this video and you enjoy watching my content, then make sure you will subscribe to my channel, like this video, and also hit the bell to get notified whenever a new video or stream is announced. So now let's talk about the timeline of the battle maps. So there are 21 battle maps in total that we are going to be talking about in today's video. We are going to be talking about the maps from the earliest to the latest, from the past, present and future. So the first map in the timeline is Valley. The reason why Valley is the first map in the timeline is because Valley is based off of the Chinese mythology mashup world, which is obviously based off of Chinese mythology. And Chinese mythology took place in 12th century BCE, or BCE is otherwise known as before the Common Era, or before Christ, and 12th century is 1200, so the year 1200. So this is one of three maps that take place before Christ. And yeah, so this is the earliest map in the timeline, taking place in 12th century BC. The second map in the timeline is Atlantis. The reason why Atlantis is the second map in the timeline is because, like Valley, it takes place before Christ, seeing as it is a mythology map, and it does take place in the era as seen on screen. And you may be wondering, why is Atlantis before Medusa if they are both based in Greek mythology? But we will actually talk about that in the next map we're going to talk about, which is obviously Medusa. So the next map in the timeline is Medusa. The reason why Medusa is in this spot is because obviously it's based off of Greek mythology, but also the reason why it is above Atlantis is because Atlantis took place around the whole era of Greek mythology, and it is still said to be maybe in somewhere on Earth today. But the reason why it's before Medusa is because Medusa is probably based off of Medusa's death. Because if you look at the whole map, it's not really her alive; it's just structures of her. So this shows that Medusa is dead, and Medusa does die during Greek mythology. So Medusa, as one of the three Gorgons, she does die by looking at herself in the mirror and turning herself to stone. So this shows that Medusa is set after Atlantis. The next map in the timeline is Castle. So the reason why Castle is the next map in the timeline is because also castles were most common in the early 11th century. So that was my main timeline point of where I could actually get castle from. So castles, yeah, they were most common in the early 11th century. So this is when castle was most likely going to be set. So castle is here in the timeline. And the next map after castle is Siege. So Siege is obviously based off of medieval warfare with castle, so it is also set in the 11th century, but it is set after castle, seen as so it must be set after castle because the castle map seems like a regular castle, no like wars or anything linked to it. However, Siege must be set after castle because in that time there's no war or anything, but in the regular castle map there isn't. So that must mean that Siege, even though both castle and Siege are set in the 11th century, Siege is set after castle because Siege is during a war after castle in the medieval warfare. The next map in the timeline is Cove. The reason why Cove is the next map in the timeline is because it's most it's mostly based off of the pirate era, which was in the 1830s, or like around 1830. But it wasn't actually specifically 1830, because 1830 was actually the time when the pirate era actually phased out of time. So, and in the Cove map, it doesn't look like there's any pirates around, and plus all of the ships that you can see are actually really broken and stuff. So you can tell that it's set after the pirate era. So this means that Cove is probably set around 1830. The next map in the timeline is Frontier. So the reason why Frontier is in this part of the timeline is because it's obviously based off of like the Western Town era, which was between the 1860s and the 1890s. So probably 1875, which is the middle of that, is probably around when Frontier was set. So I'm going to say that Frontier was set in 1875 or around then. So it had to be somewhere between the 1860s and the 1890s. The next map in the timeline is Lair. So this is the first map that is actually in the present. All of the maps that we talked about were in the past, but now we're talking about the maps that are in the present. And you may be wondering why Lair is actually set in the present. And I'm actually going to talk about Lair and Cavern, because after Lair in the timeline, it is Cavern. And I'm actually going to talk about Lair and Cavern together, because they are very similar maps. They are both maps that are deep within caves that have and these caves like have like holes at the top, and they are based on, and they are like ruins of some kind of like really old temple or something like that. And even though these temples in the caves were probably built thousands of years ago, I'm actually putting these in modern day, and the reason why I'm doing that is because of how the temples actually they look all like ruined and stuff like that. So that must mean that that it is set in modern day for both Lair and Cavern. The next map in the timeline is Temple. So similar to Lair and Cavern, you may be wondering why Temple is set in the modern day, because obviously Temple is like thousands of years old and stuff like that. But I've actually put in Temple here because if you look at the actual map, there are actually bridges, man-made bridges, of more common day. So that must mean that temple is set in the modern day, seeing as it does have man-made bridges. But if there were no like bridges there, then temple would have been much earlier on in the timeline. But no, temple is set in modern day. The next map in the timeline is Shrunk. So the reason why I've put Shrunk on in the modern day is fairly obvious. Obviously Shrunk is just based off of like a bedroom, so it's obviously modern day 2021 all around this time, somewhere in the 21st century. So yeah, that's why I've put in Shrunk in this spot in the timeline. The next map in the timeline is Festive. So I'm actually going to talk about Festive and Halloween together, because Halloween is the map after this spot. So the next map in the timeline is Halloween, and the reason why I have put Halloween and Festive together is because I think that they're obviously based off their mashup worlds, the Festive and Halloween mashup worlds, and with Festive, it's kind of like it's just based on like Santa's like area of living, like the North Pole, and like, he's got his workshop and the sleigh and stuff like that. So that must mean it's probably based in modern day. And with Halloween, it's the same thing. It just seems like a theme park, like a Halloween theme park, which would be in modern day. So that's the reason why I'm putting Festive and Halloween in the modern day era. And we're done talking about the modern day area, and the rest of the maps we're going to be talking about are actually based in the future. So the first map that is going to be in the future is Crucible. The reason why Crucible is, in my opinion, based in the future is for this reason. This is probably the most complex reason in the whole of this entire list, so get ready. So I compared the Nether and the end to both be in real life. So that must mean that the Nether, or like the Nether portal, was probably found around when the moon was first landed on, and the moon landing, the first ever moon landing, was in 1969. So I said that the when they actually found the Nether would have been the same time, but we're not the end yet. We're going to talk about that in the later on in the list. But we're going to talk about the Nether for now, since it is like Crucible, which is a Nether-based map. So I did put Crucible in this spot and in the future because, like I said, I compare it to the moon landing, and I actually looked up when they first would probably most likely make a moon base, and because of me comparing the moon landing to them finding the Nether, if like the Nether and Ember were in real life, so that's why I did that. So it would make sense how I would need to find out when they would make a moon base, because Crucible is obviously a base in the Nether, and it said on Google that they will make a moon base in around 2030, which is in 10 years, or well, obviously like just below that. So that means that I'm actually going to put Crucible in the next spot, and I'm setting Crucible in 2031. And the reason why I've done that is because, like, the moon base, so I compare the moon landing to them finding the Nether portal. So them making a moon base would be the exact same time as them making a Nether base, which and online it said that they would make a moon base in 2030. Around 2030, which means that them making a Nether base would be the exact same time. So that's why Crucible is set around the 2030s, or in this case 2031. So 10 years in the future. So yeah. Alright, now let's talk about the next map in the timeline, and the next map is Dig. So this compares to what I said about Crucible. So I believe that Dig is actually based around the year 2050. And the reason why I think that is because Dig is about like a company or something like that, and they're digging out lots of ice and stuff, lots of like whatever they can find in ice in like some kind of like snowy region, probably like somewhere in Antarctica. And what they did find in one of the big ice cubes out the front of the map was an end portal. And this is probably going to be sometime in a couple decades in the future, seeing as they are like digging like for stuff in the ice and stuff, and like they do find an end portal. So yeah, that's the reason why I put Dig at this point in the list. And the next map that is in the timeline is Shipyard. So the reason why I've put Shipyard in this spot in the timeline, and I've actually set Shipyard in the year 2100, so 2100, which is 80 years in the future. And the reason why I've done this is because Shipyard is a city in the sky, basically. So it's kind of like a big like ship, obviously, and it's surrounded by like buildings and stuff. So it literally is a city in the sky. So that's the reason why it must be in sometime in the future, seeing as it is a city in the sky. Because pretty sure there's no sky cities in the modern era. And yeah, and the people who I actually worked on figure out the timeline with, who was actually TH Clem, Mike and Nike, and C Justin MC, we all talked about this map, and this is probably the map we talked about the most, if I'm being real. And with Shipyard, we all maybe thought that Shipyard may have taken place in the Industrial Revolution, which was like basically a bunch of new technologies being made. But this wouldn't make sense because they didn't have any sky cities in the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, that's why we put Shipyard in the future, is because obviously it's like a sky city. And the next map in the timeline is Invasion, and I actually set Invasion in the year 2105, so only 5 years after Shipyard. And I've actually figured out my own little story for this. So Shipyard is obviously sitting in the sky, and then 5 years later there was an invasion of aliens, basically. So maybe, as a theory, maybe the Sky City was seen by aliens, and that's why they invaded, because they saw life and they thought, oh, let's go invade them. So yeah, that's just a little theory by me. So that's why I've set invasion in this point of time, and yeah, and that's why I've set it 5 years after Shipyard. Alright, the next few maps in the timeline are all the same, because the next map in the timeline is Capital. So the reason why Capital is in this spot, I'm actually going to talk about the next two maps in the same, I'm going to talk about it the same as well, because they're all pretty much the same. So this map is Capital, and the next map in the timeline is Atomics, and the next map after Atomics is Libertalia. So the reason why I've done the order Capital, Atomics, Libertalia is for this reason. The aliens, after they invade the main city that they do invade in the invasion map, they would most likely next invade the more populated cities, or like in the world. So Capital is based in like a kind of like a city. It's like a city map, but all like, you know, all abandoned, and it's all like broken and stuff like that. Atomics is set in like a smallish town, so not it wouldn't be like as known or as populated as the area that Capital is in. And then third is Libertalia, which is only like some weird like a boatyard or like something like that. So the reason why I've actually put the order Capital, then Atomics, then Libertalia is because that makes sense with the order. The aliens, after invading the main city, what they invade in the battle map, they would most likely invade Capital, then Atomics, then Libertalia, because them maps, they go down in the more bigger and more populated areas. So basically what I'm saying is the aliens would more likely invade bigger areas such as the cities from the invasion map and Capital, and then they would invade the smaller areas like the town area in Atomics and the boatyard in Libertalia. So that's the reasoning why I've done that order. So I actually set Capital in the year 2105, the same as invasion. Then I set Atomics a year later, and then I set Libertalia a year after that. So Atomics would be the year 2106 and Libertalia would be 2107. And now we're going to be talking about the final map in the timeline. And this map, if you haven't like figured it out yet, is Ruin. So the reason why Ruin is the last map in the timeline, and I actually set Ruin in the year 2150, so 2150, which is 130 years in the future from now. Yeah, so the reason why I put Ruin in last in the timeline is because just like Capital, Libertalia and Atomics, they are all, like, Ruin is like an abandoned, I'm pretty sure it's like a mall, like a shopping centre, something like that, and it is abandoned obviously, but the reason why it's set after the 3 Fallout maps and is actually a much further on. It's set 43 years after Libertalia and 45 years after the actual invasion. And the reason why I've done this is because in Ruin there is a lot of vegetation and like grass and nature and stuff growing, which means that it must be set like a long time after the actual invasion when all of this was destroyed. And the vegetation of Ruin really was a great way of figuring out when it was set in the timeline, and it is definitely the last point, because even though it's just like abandoned, just like Capital, Libertalia and Atomics, it must be set way after because of its vegetation that is growing there. And I think that's it. I think that's all of my reasons and all of my like ideas and plot points and stuff for the timeline of the battle maps. I actually really enjoyed making this video, so yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, then make sure you all subscribe to my channel, like this video, and also hit the bell to get notified whenever new video stream is announced. Thank you to TH Clem, Mike and F Nike, and C Justin MC, because they all helped me figure out the actual timeline of this map, and I think maybe Sonic helped as well. I might be wrong with that, but yeah. But the main three were TH Clem, Michael F. Nike, and C. Justin MC. So yeah, thank you to them three for helping me out. If you guys have any other Detectiveomedia episode ideas for what I can do, then yeah, comment them down below, and I'll see whether or not I will do them. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. So bye, guys.